All right. So I want to start out by telling a funny story because I don't know if it's the heat. I'm just gonna blame it on the heat, but I've been a little bit of a scatterbrain lately. And so Tracy,
I just know it's got to be
zip
close.
it.
Something.
Well, so the other day, somebody called and said, "Hey, can you get out to this location? I want you to do some surveillance and blah, blah, blah." And I ran out and I forgot my wallet at home. And I got to the gas station, like, I don't know, 20 minutes from my house. And I pulled up to the pump and I went to fill up my tank. And I didn't have my card, so I couldn't get gas. I thought, oh, well, I'll just try to make it back home and go get my wallet. And at this point, I'm running extremely late. The person that wanted me at this place is getting irritated with me. But Tracy, zip it. Oh, okay. Anyway, so I called my roadside assistants and they said it would be a couple hours. And it ran over a couple hours. I sat there in the 95-degree heat. Of course, I didn't have air conditioning because I couldn't run my car, and I'm like sweating profusely. And after 2 hours, the roadside assistance guy calls me and he says, I'm still about 30 minutes out. And I'm like, God, the freaking hell, I'm pissed. And shortly after that, a Williamson County sheriff's deputy pulled up and gets out of his car and comes over to help me. So I canceled my roadside and I'm like, all right, well, he says to me before he lets me get in the back of his patrol car, he said, before you get in the back of my car, I have to ask you, do you have any warrants? He said, because if you do, I'll have to arrest you. And I said, no, sir, I don't have any warrants. I said, but I like to bust crooked cops. Are you crooked? So anyway, I think he kind of got a kick out of that. I mean, maybe he didn't know what to think of, but he did kind of chuckle.
Did he understand who you were at that
Well,
point?
I did explain that. And
Yeah, okay.
so I ended up explaining it, but
Now I got to tell you something because Mama's coming out and she's pissed.
what?
Why in the hell didn't you call me? I would have sent you some money and you could have gotten it.
Well,
You
'cause
didn't have to have your wallet. Don't you have Apple Pay?
I thought I could, well, I thought I could make it home.
I know how you do that. We're driving along, driving along, driving along. Bing! It's dark. It's in the wee
Don't
hours.
worry, it's not my phone.
Have a cold morning.
Remember that?
And yeah, and I said the light turns amber, and I go, and it bings, and I go, I think and you go, oh, don't worry, just like this. That's just the gas.
It's not my phone.
And I said, do you think we can make it at home? And you go, oh yeah, sure.
Oh, yeah, we're fine.
How far did we, on a cold, this time it was cold, and I had to go to the restroom, and luckily you had somebody come out and save us that night.
Yeah.
But how far were we from the house?
I don't know, but I don't know. But I will say that I think I'm frozen. Am I frozen?
You are frozen.
I'm frozen.
Am I frozen?
Cold as ice. Will in the sack.
At least you're not frozen like this.
Right.
Your eyes are open.
Yeah. Well, okay, so today I wanted to discuss some updates in the Gary Sutton case. We can talk about some other cases too, just little mentions here and there, but that's the main case I wanted to talk about today. Why am I frozen?
Does Linda want to say anything, or?
I don't know. Linda is I was looking to see, I don't think she's even connected to audio.
Okay.
Yeah. But What is going on with my?
And undo your audio and then click it again.
There we go. Okay, cool. I just didn't want to be frozen. So yeah, what was about 3 months ago, we did a podcast called A Plea from Death Row, I think is what it was called. And it was kind of an introduction to the case, but I just want you guys to know I have 2 ginormous Tupperware boxes, like big Tupperware boxes full of these. These are transcripts. So I had a lot of catching up to do before I could really give my honest opinion or really say much of anything about the case. Gary was, I mean, just hands down, it was a wrongful conviction. He's been in there for 30 years now. And just in the last couple months, I've gotten some statements from witnesses that have just really made it clear to me that the whole trial was not right. Now, I just want to discuss some of those things with you today. I wonder if I can share my screen. Oh, yeah, look. Okay. Okay, advanced sharing options. There's only all participants. Okay, here we go.
Oh, Vita.
Did you see Vita? Oh, you see, yeah, she's right behind me. Okay, so I don't know how to do this, but I want to pull up my report and just kind of go over some of these things. I did actually make a video about this case as well. I'll have to find that and share it after we get done with this podcast, but I guess I'll start with the summary of the case. On February 24th, 1992, the body of Mr. Tommy Griffin was discovered on the riverbank of Sevierville, Tennessee, from a shotgun blast to the head. His sister, Connie Branham, was discovered in the next county over, burned alive in her car, just 4 short days after Tommy's body was found. When investigators began to retrace the steps of these victims, they learned that the defendants, Gary Sutton and his uncle, James Dillinger, had allegedly been seen with both the victims prior to their being murdered. Naturally, and without knowing information exposed through the investigation, any person on the outside looking in would believe that Sutton and Dillinger had acted together to commit this gruesome act. However, 30 years later, with execution just around the corner, Sutton, who has consistently maintained his innocence, has finally obtained the evidence necessary to prove that there are other possible suspects with motive, and that the investigators who took the utilitarian approach to achieve what they believed was justice have made dire mistakes, which has caused another innocent life to be lost.
Not just them did they make the mistake, but in the trial there were mistakes made.
Right, exactly.
Jury especially, yeah.
I think that, the utilitarian approach is a really common approach, I think, when it comes to law enforcement and all the way to the prosecution and, and beyond, all the way through the trial. And it's really sad because it's kind of, it's playing God. It's, if the investigator or the prosecution has made up their mind, and just basically will do anything they need to do to get the conviction. They may think that it's the noble thing or that it's the right thing, but it's just not right. If you have to do anything that is, less than honest to gain a conviction. It just shouldn't happen. So
making the facts fit the situation instead of the facts bringing
right,
you to what's going
right,
on. It's
exactly.
yeah, it's happened. I would like to say it happened because it was so long ago, but as we know, it's still happening.
Still happening. During the pre-trial phase, defense attorneys F.D. Gibson and John Gorgon, F.D. Gibson was for Sutton and Gorgon was for Dillinger. They raised the issue with the court pertaining to their lack of experience in criminal, particularly capital murder cases. The court refused to relieve them and find better, more competent attorneys to represent the accused. Not to say that they weren't competent in what they were used to doing, but certainly they were admitting on record that they did not feel competent to try this case. They did not want these men's lives in their hands because they knew that they did not have the experience that they needed to provide a adequate defense.
And the court used that to their advantage.
I believe they did.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Though the pair certainly gave it their very best effort, ultimately they were unable to overcome the bias that was so blatantly displayed throughout the entire judicial process. Transcripts, all these transcripts, transcripts of the trial and subsequent hearings reveal non-truths told by lead investigators under oath in pursuit of search warrants, jury tampering, and coercion of witnesses. In fact, the complete lack of integrity displayed by investigators combined with the court's compliance to allow evidence in that should have been stricken caused the defendants to be faced with a set of prejudices that was impossible to overcome. And here are just a few examples of such occurrences. Now, before I get into these, I just want to say that, you know, this is something that the more that I see of this in my job, the more that I am learning of unfair trials and possible wrongful convictions, and the more that I'm seeing, you know, just blatant unethical behavior on behalf of investigators, and just it's frightening to me, because I think that, I mean, it's almost worse. I mean, it's almost worse to have your life taken away, to be incarcerated, and, you know, either whether you're put on death row or sentenced to life in prison, either way, your life has been, you know, just stripped away. And, you know, to be convicted of something that you didn't do, to be found guilty of a murder that you didn't commit, I think that is, man, that's got to be one of my worst fears. You know, I think that is just one of the worst things that could possibly happen to a human being. You know,
yeah, manufacturing of evidence hasn't happened before, now has it?
No, never. Yeah, I mean, but to like just sit in prison day in and day out and know that you did not commit this crime, but, you know, 30 years of just sitting there staring at jail cells, and it's horrific to me. It's absolutely horrific to me. So the examples of such occurrences, and like I said before, we had done sort of an introduction to this case in a previous podcast, but at this point, I'm speaking with confidence because I've done my due diligence, I've done my homework, and I know that, you know, that everything I'm saying is fact. It's not just coming from the family of the defendants. It's not just, you know, I've made sure to validate the things that they've said. So
we go over the new evidence.
Yes, we'll go over some. Yeah, we'll definitely go over some of that.
Because that's the most, to me, that's the most eye-opening part.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've been able to uncover some new evidence in this case that I think is really, really pertinent. Is just, if it does not get this man exonerated or at least get him a new trial, then I don't know what could. I mean, aside from somebody just saying he didn't do it, I did. I mean, it's uncanny. It's just it's mind blowing. It's absolutely mind blowing. So,
But it also shows what goes on at
It
every
does.
trial, especially when the jury thing really got me.
Mhm.
And that just shows you, how that goes on in
Right.
all of them.
Well, I've even got I have an alternate theory of what could have happened. And I want to talk about that a little bit. I didn't put that in my memo that you've read, Tracy, but I do want to talk about that a little bit, because my mind is just kind of, and it helps me to discuss it too, because when I hear it coming out of my mouth and can piece it together, sometimes parts of it that I haven't quite, the pieces that I haven't quite found where they belong, like fall into place as I'm talking. So so this is partly for me as well, but so one example, my first example that I want to mention is that it was what I already mentioned. Sutton's attorneys acknowledged that they lacked experience in homicide cases and requested to be relieved of their duties to the clients. The court denied their request. Key witness, Dr. Charles Harlan. This is a huge one. Like, how they didn't immediately overturn this case and give them a mistrial, I don't know. But key witness, Dr. Charles Harlan, who was responsible for establishing the time and date of the death of the victim, was being investigated by the TBI at the time of this trial. He later lost his medical license, causing several cases that he had testified in to be overturned. And though the defense's forensic expert adamantly disagreed with Harlan's testimony. Let's just stop right there. We should mention, I think, who the defense's forensic expert was. Tracy?
Yes.
You remember who it was?
The forensic, I don't remember, but I can
The guy
read it.
the founder of the body farm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is no, this is no second-rate expert.
Now he was for the defense, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, he was the founder of the body farm. Gosh, I had a lengthy discussion with people who have gone there. I myself wanted to go to the body farm. This body farm we're talking about is in Knoxville. Because there are other colleges that have that type of program.
But this individual is so respected in this line of work, in this field. And I mean, he's just one of the top experts in the country. And he adamantly disagreed with Harlan's testimony in this case. But the court refused to acknowledge the possibility that Harlan's report was inaccurate, because if it did, it would change the outcome of the entire case. Whether or not the defendants could possibly have been the perpetrators of this crime relied heavily upon the timeline created and sworn to by this discredited witness.
And Bill Bass is the other Bill Bass.
Bill Bass. Yes. Yep. So on to number 3. Although the victim had been arrested on public intoxication charges on the same night in question, the same night that they say he was murdered, he was arrested on public intoxication charges. The arresting officer, Officer Roberts, failed to get the names of the 2 older gentlemen that were driving a dark pickup truck that the victim was with at the time that he was arrested. And to date, these men have never been identified, but arguably should have been sought out for questioning and considered suspects.
He was sitting on the tailgate. The victim was sitting on the tailgate of this pickup truck, and there's these other 2 men.
That the 2 men that were with were not the defendants.
No.
It was not Dillinger. It was not Sutton.
And they never got the names, witness, nothing. But
Right.
of course, the victim was alive at that time, so it might
Right.
not have been a reason that he didn't get them. However, why, if you're going to arrest somebody, get the witnesses' names and
Well, and I disagree that there wasn't a reason, because, reading the transcripts, the officer claims that Sutton, or that not Sutton, sorry, that the victim, Tommy Griffin, was behaving strangely, like he was acting like he was scared.
right,
So
yeah.
if he was acting like he was afraid to say something, then, I think it would be a reasonable assumption that the person or people that he was afraid of were there.
And right. So at least get the number of the truck tag,
Mhm.
anything. But all he
Right.
could remember was it was a
Dark.
dark colored black pickup truck or a black. I thought he said black, but I can't totally.
Mhm.
You read the transcripts, but
Right. It was dark and black, whatever, dark, whatever it was. It was
and
a
it was on a
It was-
highway, a major highway.
it was not on a high, it was off of a exit. But still, regardless, I do think that that was probably one of the first mistakes made by law enforcement in this case, was not figuring out who those men were. And I think that I myself, if that was me, and I legitimately thought this person was afraid of, something, was afraid of answering my questions, I would have to assume that the person that he was afraid, that he was afraid to answer the questions because of somebody that was there. So anyway, moving on, family members of the victim were seen talking to the jurors when the person who witnessed when the person who witnessed this informed the judge that she saw the jurors talking to the victim's family. The judge replied, "I think it'll be okay."
Right. Which it's not okay in
No.
any way, shape, or form.
Right.
Whether it's not.
No, it's not. So lead investigator, Detective Widener, was confronted on the stand by the judge. I've read the transcripts. I've seen it for myself. This is true. That the judge confronted him for lying in an affidavit about having two eyewitnesses that claimed to have seen the defendants at the crime scene. It was that false testimony that gave him grounds for the search warrant at Dillinger's trailer. So moving on to number 6, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that, because there is actually something else about that is relevant, but we'll circle back around to that one. So when confronted with the possibility, last but not least, when confronted with the possibility of separating the defendants in order to ensure that they both received a fair trial, the state told the judge that if they did that, they would have to let Mr. Sutton go, because they had no evidence tying Mr. Sutton directly to the crime. So despite discrepancies, Sutton and Dillinger were convicted on first-degree murder charges in Blount County Circuit Court on September 5th, 1996. On appeal, the defendants raised the following issues of the constitutionality of the indictments and the issue of separate jury trials. The appellate court denied their motion. So
are you getting ready? I know I'm interrupting because
new evidence.
Well, the jury thing is so important because there's so many jurors that to me it's just very, I know it's all important. I'm not saying it's not, but that is just number one. The jury was seen talking to the victim's family. Number two, you haven't gotten to, but there are several. Number two, I'm not going to say it, you say it, but I'm
Oh,
not going to say
right.
it. You
My
say it.
new evidence, right? I got you. Okay. So, I spoke with, I went to the homes of the jurors. I spoke with all of the jurors, except for, two, which are deceased. And then there's some discrepancy, with one of the jurors that's listed. When I talked to her, she said she was released, and I don't know who replaced her, but it's very bizarre to me. So I can't figure out who the 12th juror even was. So that's a whole other thing I need to work on, but it's very bizarre. But when I spoke with the jurors, one of the jurors told me that she was the last juror to sign the guilty verdict, and that she had been talked into it by a friend who was also on the jury.
Now, is that allowed to have friends that are on the same jury? I guess you can. I was actually in a jury. I didn't
I
get
mean, I don't think you're supposed to, no, but
but I had a friend that I knew, and because I'm everybody in my family was law enforcement.
Mhm.
They didn't want me as a juror.
Right.
However, I was in there with somebody that we used to, two couples, and went out all the time.
Mhm.
And so I don't know.
Mhm.
I don't know. I would think it could be an appeal issue.
Well, yeah, it could be. I think it's compared to everything else that we've got, I think it's pretty minor. I mean, it's big, but compared to comparatively, it's small potatoes. But then, and see, I'm not going to say any names right now because, but I just want to stress to the public how badly this trial and this investigation was handled. Another juror said that while they were deliberating on the final day, that there was a woman who was becoming very agitated with any jurors who were asking questions, that this woman demanded that everybody find him guilty and stop asking questions so that they could go home. Another juror said that the state drove them by the crime scene, like went out of their way to drive them by the crime scene on the way to and from court every single day.
Yep.
And that she felt like that, did influence her in some way, that it was very difficult to, be there hearing about all these things that had supposedly happened, and then to drive by the crime scene, that you couldn't help but to have this visual every time you drove by. And
You're not supposed to. The judges usually, if you read the judges, I'm sure it's in the file. The judge's instructions are don't discuss it, don't see anything on social media, which there's no social media back then, but don't watch TV, yet you're driving by, don't investigate on your own. That's almost like investigating on your own.
well,
Going
yeah,
every day.
arguably it seems like something not quite right about that. So then one of the witnesses, one of their key witnesses, told me that she felt like, she, when the detective showed her, the Dillinger's white truck, that she said it looked like his truck, but she wasn't sure. She was never sure. And she really felt like they put that forth like it was a sure thing. And she has a hard time sleeping at night, thinking that her testimony may have played a part in this man, potentially being executed. I mean, he's set currently to be executed if the new evidence and everything that we have put together doesn't succeed. And and he isn't exonerated or granted a new trial, then he will be executed.
Yeah, and the fact that they pushed and exaggerated.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Fabricated, not even
Fabricated.
exaggerated,
Yeah,
but
exaggerated is too light of a word. Fabricated that she said this was the truck
Mhm.
compared to, she said it could be the truck.
Well, and it gets even better than that, because so Dillinger drove a white Dodge Ram with the Dodge emblem on the hubcaps. And okay, put a pin in that. Remember that. I'm going to come back to it. So then I had this other witness that this particular witness was a key witness because he lived near the blue hole where Tommy was shot and killed, and he had heard 3 shots. And so they used his testimony to also to try to pin down the date and time. But what is extremely interesting about the testimony, the statement that he provided to me, is that he goes on to tell me that he saw a dark colored boxy vehicle that resembled like an old Cadillac or an Oldsmobile. And I actually went back to his house with a picture of Gary Sutton's Camaro, just to clarify. I mean, that doesn't sound like a Camaro to me, but I had to get it straight from him. I showed him a picture of the Camaro and I said, could it have been this vehicle? And he said, no, definitely not. So, you know, and I already knew that because you know, Camaro's not boxy. But I showed him Gary Sutton's vehicle and he said, no, absolutely not. So a boxy style, you know, boxy shaped, dark vehicle wouldn't be Dillinger's white truck and wouldn't be Sutton's, Camaro. So then who would that be? That is the vehicle that he saw fleeing the scene just after hearing the shots. And I specifically asked him if that was discussed in his testimony, if that was brought up, and he said no. So that is something that I feel that they deliberately left out, which would, you know, which would be considered,
Exactly.
yeah, and which would be considered exculpatory evidence that was, you know, not revealed. On top of that,
It
so
didn't play into their hand.
it did not fit their narrative, right? So in addition to that, James Dillinger drove the white Dodge Ram with the emblems. Okay. So, I found out that, we know that there were actually 2 other suspects with motive. And that one of those 2 suspects also drove a white pickup truck. His was a Dodge D100, boxy, you know, boxy shaped truck, older model. And when after I learned that that suspect also drove a white truck, I went back to the witness's house that had seen the white truck, but wasn't sure if it was the same white truck shown to her by the detectives that belonged to James Dillinger. I went back to her and I showed her that photo again. And I said, I showed her a photo of a D100. And I said, could it have been this truck? And she said, I'm not sure. I mean, she's just she wasn't sure. She wasn't sure then, let alone now. And I said, let me ask you something. I said, do you recall anything distinct about the truck you saw? Like, for instance, did there happen to be Dodge emblems on the Dodge logo emblems on the hubcaps? And she said, I don't remember seeing that. Well, I think that was a very distinct feature. And I think that hello, I'm on a Zoom. I think that if, good one. I think that if it was Dillinger's truck with the emblems, I think that that is something that very much would have been zoned in on, because it would have specified, it would have been something that could have really put it in stone that it was Dillinger's truck. But the fact that that was never mentioned, and the fact that you know, it was just, oh, it was just a white truck with a toolbox in the back. Well,
Yeah, that's very,
that's like every truck in Tennessee, is it not?
yeah, because the number one work truck
Right,
that people purchase are, and not just in Tennessee,
right,
it's the white truck
right.
because it's the cheapest with paint, and it's the you get a fleet of trucks, and they're usually all white trucks unless you have some type of emblem or thing going on. But
Yep.
that is the number one construction truck,
Yes.
everything.
Yeah.
And that's probably pretty much, and this was from Knoxville, Tennessee. This is in
Sevierville,
which is
Blount County.
yeah, closer to Dollywood.
Yeah.
Pigeon Forge. Okay.
Yeah, Gatlinburg area.
So yeah, it's crazy between the witnesses and the jurors. It's just, it's totally ridiculous.
Right.
Have that going on. That's just what do they call that? Not a clown court, but something.
Mockery? Huh?
A circus.
Oh, I thought you said clown court, and I'm thinking like mock trial.
No.
Okay, so now I just kind of want to, you know, when you take the previously raised issues and you kind of smash them together with the new evidence, and just kind of this is what we get. So these are the relevant facts, as you know, as I this is just kind of everything smushed together. Defendant Sutton and the victim Tommy Griffin were close friends. Defendant Dillinger is defendant Sutton's uncle. The victim and his sister lived in trailers close to the same area that Dillinger and Sutton lived. And Dillinger, okay, this is key. This is kind of a big deal, because I think this is what essentially gave motive to Dillinger. So prior to the night in question, defendant Dillinger's trailer was shot up, and he filed a police report stating that he believed that he knew who it was because the victim's brother, and he had bad blood. His brother was James. Later, detectives claimed to have found spent shells at Dillinger's trailer that matched the shells found at the crime scene. Now, I want to bring you back to the issue of the illegal search warrant. Okay.
Right. Because
it was that illegal search warrant that led them to find these spent shells. So, I mean, technically, that search warrant should have been thrown out. You know, any evidence found from that search warrant should have been thrown out any damn way. But it wasn't. So, you know, being that it wasn't, I raised the question of who's to say that the person that shot at James Dillinger's trailer, is not the same person that shot and killed Tommy Griffin, and that those spent shells were not from Dillinger's gun or shotgun or whatever.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
At the scene of the shot up trailer, did they find spent shells?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
At the scene of the other person's death, did they find the victim's death, did they find spent shells?
Yes.
So why had they spent shells at that person's trailer? I mean, he's not going to collect them. Those would be shells that he had from some other place.
Well,
you know what? Why would he?
It's difficult to kind of wrap your head around, and I just want to make sure you're understanding what I'm saying. The defendant, Sutton, who's been charged with this murder, his trailer was shot up. You got that? That's what we're talking about. So his trailer got shot up not long before Tommy Griffin was killed.
Okay.
And when they got that illegal search warrant and found these spent shells at at the defendant's trailer, the question I'm raising, the issue I'm raising is how can they say with certainty that those shells they found wasn't the same person, which leads into my alternate theory that whoever killed Tommy Sutton and Connie Brenham also had it out for James Dillinger.
That's kind of what I was confused at. Okay, so they're saying Dillinger shot up.
No. Dillinger's trailer was shot up.
Okay.
Right. And when Dillinger made his police report, he said he thought he knew who did it. He believed that Tommy's brother did it, because they had some sort of
bad blood,
which is what essentially created the motive.
So where did they find this? Where was the illegal search done and they found spent shells?
At Dillinger's trailer where it was shot up.
And the spent shells were, they think, from whose gun?
Well, they were saying they were from Dillinger's gun, because Dillinger did tend to shoot his guns on his property, from what I know.
Right.
But I'm just saying, how would they know which ones were from him just doing some target practice in his yard? And I'm doing this, but it was a shotgun.
Right.
Well,
shotgun. Yeah.
How can they tell which ones were? And this is just my question with their investigation. It's just me questioning their investigation.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm just saying, like, I think I don't think that they can rightfully say for sure, knowing, and with there being, documented proof that Dillinger's trailer was shot up recently. Before that, like, how do they know that the spent shells they found weren't from that?
Exactly. That makes no sense. That makes no sense.
Which brings me back around also to the two men that were never identified.
And the shells that they found elsewhere. So the men shot up and there's shells there, and then they shot the victim, and those shells could very well be the shells that the person shot up the trailer with.
Exactly.
I mean,
so okay, moving on. The victim and both defendants had gone to Howie's Hideaway Lounge for adult beverages on the day in question. Barmaid Jamie Carr testified that the trio arrived around between 2:30 and 3, and that they were still there when her shift was over at 5 p.m. Ms. Carr also testified that the men seemed to be getting along fine, and that she did not witness anything out of the ordinary about them on this day. Ms. Carr testified that the men drank about 4 beers each during her shift, and that defendant Dillinger paid for all of the drinks. I cannot get over that. Like, who takes somebody out for drinks and pays for all their drinks and then kills them? Like, I just don't, I can't, like, it doesn't make any sense, like, nobody seemed to have seen any sort of odd or confrontational behavior going on between them. They seemed fine. They were getting along. They
It's
shot.
not typical human behavior. That's just, that's not how typical. Yeah. I mean, maybe on some TV show where it's somebody that's a paid hired hitman from another country that comes in and is suave. And, I
Buys
mean,
his
but
target, drinks and gets him drunk and then kills him. But
yeah, that's
these were
just
not hitmen.
not
These
a
were
standard
these
what?
were just backwoods good old boys. They weren't,
Right. They're not good.
you know.
Yeah.
So Miss Carr testified. Okay, I already said that part. Miss Carr was not able again. She was not able to positively identify Sutton's Chevy Camaro as the vehicle that they arrived in at Howie's Hideaway Lounge on the day in question. The barmaid that relieved Miss Carr, Terry Lilly, testified that the men stayed for about another hour and a half to 2 hours, and that she did not witness any confrontational between them either. Unfortunately, both of these ladies are deceased. So I have not been able to speak to them directly, but Miss Lilly testified that the men drank 2 to 3 beers each before leaving around 7 p.m. And again, that Dillinger paid for all of those drinks. Later that night, as I said before, Tommy Griffin was picked up off the side of the road and arrested for public intoxication. The arresting officer, Officer Roberts, testified that Griffin was at that time with 2 older gentlemen who he later clarifies that older to him was in their 50s. And, you know, specifically that it was not Dillinger or Sutton. I don't believe that anyone's ever asserted that it was. Griffin, according to his testimony, acted scared and refused to tell the officer what had happened. Those 2 men have never been identified and should have been considered suspects. Detective Widener committed perjury by claiming to have 2 eyewitnesses who could place the defendants at the crime scene, yet evidence from that search warrant obtained from the search warrant was not stricken. It was that
Right.
search warrant
Makes
that
no
produced,
sense.
it was that search warrant that produced the shells that should have been in question due to the previous incident of Dillinger's truck being shot at. Number 12, Agent Davenport of the TBI violated Sutton's constitutional rights and committed perjury when he pulled Sutton out of his jail cell, despite his attorney at the time, David Webb's statement to them that no one was allowed to speak to him outside of his presence. He also forged the name of another deputy who accompanied him that day. Then we've got our witness who claimed to have seen a dark colored boxy vehicle fleeing the crime scene.
Fleeing the crime scene.
Fleeing the crime scene. Oh boy, I just had a weird visual on that one.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Fleeing the crime scene after hearing 3 shots fired. This description does not match either defendant's vehicles, but it does match the description of the vehicle that Sutton has described the victim leaving in with a, sorry guys, don't mean to be politically incorrect, but Sutton says a fat, ugly woman. Okay.
And it wasn't me. I was young then.
Shut up, Tracy. Come on. You're not fat or ugly. But I'm saying, you know, okay, so there's so much in question here. You know, I mean, defendant Sutton has always maintained that Tommy Griffin had left after he and Dillinger bailed Tommy Griffin out of jail.
Right. They went and bailed him out.
They went and bailed him out. So Dillinger pays for all his drinks that night and then bails him out of jail. But
right. Yeah, that's still the same. You're my buddy, you're my buddy, you're my buddy.
Right. And there was no confrontational, no aggression, nothing. But yet supposedly they killed him. It just doesn't make a lick of sense. But Sutton has always maintained his statement that after they bailed Tommy out of jail, Tommy left with a fat, ugly woman. who was, according to Sutton, driving an older, dark colored boxy car. So, and for the record, when I went and spoke with this witness and he told me that he saw an older, boxy, dark colored car fleeing the scene after hearing the shots. As far as I know, I have not so far, I've still got a few folders left to go through, but so far I have seen really no mention of such a vehicle. So the fact that Sutton's statement is that Tommy left with this woman in that car, and now you've got this witness telling me that he saw a vehicle that matches the same description as Sutton's description.
That's two.
That's not, there's no way anybody could have orchestrated that. You know, Sutton has, as far as I know, he's never spoken to this man. I don't see how it could be possible that he has. So this couldn't be something that they, you know, worked up together. It's just, I think this is, we're putting these pieces together, and it's unfortunate. It's just, it's a travesty, you know, that law enforcement, especially, you know, it's been 30 years. Oh crap, longer than that. It was 92. Yeah. 30 years. You know, 30 years ago, it should have been even easier to put this information, you know, to extract this information and put it all together. Here I am 30 years later, you know, piecing it together. And
But like you said, they had, this is how it was going to
they
be, and
had,
everything had to fit into it. And if it didn't, they didn't bring it in the trial.
they had their sights set. Yes, it does seem that way. So then we've got the juror telling me that she was talked into signing the guilty verdict. Then you've got the other juror telling me that they drove the jurors by the crime scene every day.
Then
And
the other juror who,
then you got the defense attorneys that recognized their incompetence and asked to be relieved, but were denied their request. Then you've got expert witness Dr. Harlan, who was investigated by the TBI and discredited. Several of his cases have to date been overturned, but not this one. Defendant Sutton claims that the victim, Tommy Griffin, left the jail after being bailed out in a dark colored car with a fat, ugly woman. Although Griffin was never seen alive again, Sutton still, after spending 30 years of his life behind bars, still maintains his innocence. So, in conclusion, for the reasons that I have laid out to you today, collectively, both new evidence and previously raised issues, there is no doubt in my mind that defendant Sutton suffered multiple prejudices that would have undoubtedly resulted in a different outcome had the state conducted its investigation with the level of due diligence and integrity that it is supposed to. Perhaps the most damning piece of evidence is the lack of actual evidence against defendant Sutton, and the fact that the state knew that the only way that they would get a conviction on him was to try him with Dillinger.
bingo.
Based on the assertion that he and Dillinger were together during this established time of death, which is also a big pile of discredit crap, you know? So, however, with the expert witness, Charles Harlan, having been discredited, how can anyone say with certainty that this was the one of the rare occasions when Dr. Harlan's testimony could be trusted? The fact of the matter is that essentially none of the evidence that was used to convict either defendant has withstood the test of time. If one were to stricken the illegal search warrant based on the perjured testimony, the testimony of the discredited expert witness that established the time and date of death, the guilty verdict of a tampered with jury, the testimony of a witness who has provided a new statement expressing that the state put her maybe forth as certainty in effort to place Dillinger at the crime scene, and another witness whose account of seeing a boxy vehicle flee the crime scene was left out entirely. There would be nothing left to convict either defendant. Perhaps more importantly is the fact that the state failed to disclose exculpatory evidence that could have helped the defense develop an alternate theory. Failure to provide that exculpatory evidence is reason enough to grant the defendants a new trial, but there is little to no evidence left standing to even try them with. So in my opinion, my humble opinion, and I'll say right here, and I'm not an attorney, but I just kind of feel like this is almost, it's just common sense, that they really are left with nothing to try them with. So it seems to me that the only thing to do, the right thing to do, is to exonerate Gary Sutton of all charges. That is what I have to say after my 3.5 month long investigation into the murder of Tommy Griffin and the wrongful conviction of Gary Sutton. And where's my gavel? So, thoughts, concerns, anything?
No, it's concerning that a suspect or a whatever they're called, whoever the defendant, there we go.
Right.
It's scary that a defendant it's railroaded.
Right.
Because we know several that they're trying to railroad, and it's almost the same thing. And it all somehow it comes down to, and this is terrible to say, and it shouldn't be.
I already know what you're gonna say, but might as well.
It comes down to
drum roll.
To whose schlong is bigger than the others, you know?
Not what I thought you were gonna say.
No, like, it's a competition. Yeah. Oh, I can't be wrong. How many people have come and said that, oh, no, about you, because they had to be right because they were the men?
Well, and
that's what I was going to say.
At the end of the day, the truth is mighty and will prevail.
That's right.
Trust in God, keep fighting for truth, and that's all we can do.
That's it.
So, all right, guys. Well, I guess we'll go ahead and sign off, unless you had anything else you wanted to share.
No, I don't have anything to share that's interesting. My dog's doing great with his cadaver training.
Good.
I can't wait for some point to be able to go and actually search, because I know a lot of people would like searches, but we have to be able to get on the property and have to have signatures to be able to get on some property.
Right. There's a lot of
there's a lot of stuff I would like to do, and we will be doing, but he's doing great.
Great. That's good. That's good. So everybody stand by, because in the next couple months, we're going to be hosting a concert to raise awareness for Gary Sutton, to try to get the public just a little more involved in this case, and fighting
their eyes opened to what the other side of it.
And the thing is, I think there's a lot of people that just prefer to stay out of it. But the thing is that this does pertain to everybody, because like I said, I mean, I just can't think of anything worse that could happen than to be convicted of something, a crime that you didn't commit. and to
Well,
lose
you want to
life over it.
trust those people. You want to trust them so much.
Mhm,
And you don't want to see that this is happening.
mhm,
You
mhm.
just don't. It's just it's something that it's devastating.
And look who is here. Oh, she's connecting. There she is. Let's see if we can get her to join us.
Her audio went off. She turned her audio off.
Oh, don't do that. Carolyn, come on and talk to us. Well, okay, so we were just wrapping up, Carolyn. We'll do another one later if you want to talk a little bit as well, but we just really went over Gary's case and talked about some of the recent developments and without really naming names. And so I wish she would come on and say something, but all right, well, I'm going to go ahead and end this. And until next time, we have a few cases right now to discuss. I was, pretty, I don't want to say excited, but I was anxious. I wanted to talk a little bit about Sutton since, I didn't really have a whole lot to say from firsthand knowledge in our last podcast. But oh, there she is. I think she's coming on. Hello. Are you there? Carolyn? Carolyn?
I hear something. It's a male talking. Oh, there she is.
Carolyn?
There. Oh. It popped on.
Yeah.
Next time we'll do it early and get her up and going.
Yeah.
And
I sent her a message, but I think it was too late, too last minute.
Yeah, we like to pop things up and then put it off and then put it, because we just have chaos.
Fly by the seat of our pants kind of gals.
Yeah. Yeah, except it's like, okay, I gotta tell me at least ahead of time so I can put makeup on.
All right, well, let's sign off. So Justice Warriors, hang in there, keep fighting for the truth, and we will see you soon. Mwah.
Bye.
Bye.